It's time for the Volquest podcast, where we dissect the biggest news items of the week. Good Tuesday, everyone. Welcome to the Volquest.com podcast presented by our friends at Smoky Mountain Organics, East Tennessee's most trusted health and wellness store, focusing on natural products and organic remedies. Smoky Mountain Organics. You can check them out online at SmokyMountainOrganics.com. Visit one of their 4 locations in Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge, Sevierville, and, of course, the location in Knoxville, just across from Trader Joe's on Kingston Pike. That is Smoky Mountain Organics, East Tennessee's #1 trusted health and wellness store. With Austin Price and Rob Lewis, I'm Brent Hubbs. Plenty to get to on this podcast. We'll start with a little bit of football. Tennessee in the Music City Bowl. Guys, when you look at this and you look at what the SEC did, it looks like they said teams with they slotted everybody based on team record is what it appears like they've done. Fair or not fair?
I think that's fair. Certainly looks that way anyways, Brent. So, I think, there'll be plenty of fans that are excited that, they're in Nashville. There'll be some that's disappointed they wanted to go take their, kind of Christmas vacation and go to Florida, but kind of is what it is.
Yeah, I just don't think – Nashville might be ahead of the Tax Slater Bowl. That's always a debate on how that game is slotted, Rob, when you look at it. But I think the intrigue and the excitement from Arkansas's fan base was enough for the Outback Bowl to say, hey, we'll take the team with the better record by 1 game whose fan base is just as excited that we've never had in our bowl game. And that's why the Outback Bowl ended up with Arkansas over Tennessee, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. It does look pretty much like they just went chalk, right down the standings and the overall record. And if I'm Tennessee, I'm happy. I think you're gonna have a really strong showing in Nashville, despite looks like some price gouging going on with the tickets early on. But I get AP's point too. I can see where some fans probably want to go and get a little of Florida sunshine, but I think Tennessee's gonna have a really strong turnout.
Austin, how much does Tennessee and Heupel and this program need to take advantage of a week in Nashville, coming off year 1, getting ready for year 2, when the first few months they were on the job, they obviously couldn't be out and about anywhere? How important is it for Tennessee to take advantage of an extended period of time in Nashville? And not in terms of going and seeing kids, because you can't, but people of influence, former players, those types of things. How important do you think that is surrounding obviously trying to go win a game?
I think it's important, but I think it's probably not as important because Tennessee's going to be back there in the spring. If Tennessee was going to be back there in the spring, then I think it would be way more important. But you're talking about 2 times in Nashville in 5 months, or 4 months, 4 full months. So, for me, Tennessee's going to get plenty of time, in the growing metropolis that is Nashville between now and the end of April.
Yeah, certainly is. It looks like Tennessee is going to try to do a full-blown weekend in Nashville, as we mentioned in the War Room, possibility of moving that baseball series with Auburn to Nashville for the weekend and just kind of make it a big orange takeover in the mid-state. We'll see if all that plays out and ends up happening that way. Purdue's the matchup. Rob, I know none of us have broken down this matchup. Initial thoughts on Tennessee getting paired up with Purdue?
I've not studied into breaking down, but I've watched, as I'm sure you all have, watched parts of some of their games, watched part of the Iowa game, part of the Michigan State game. And to me, they do some things well, but to me, it's just typical, what you always think about when you think about SEC versus Big Ten. I think Tennessee's going to have a lot more speed than them.
And it looks like, Austin, that Tennessee is probably going to have a full roster with the exception of Alante and Cade Mays at this point. It doesn't sound like, I know things can change, but I'm not hearing a ton of vibes on guys wanting to opt out or looking elsewhere. I think Alante, that game being in Nashville, if he were healthy, I think Alante's playing in a bowl game. I think that's clearly the injury situation with his foot. And from a health standpoint, I just have a hard time seeing Cade's ankle being ready to go in this bowl game as well.
Yeah, I agree.
But anybody else?
Not to my knowledge. I guess you never say never with, Cade's ankle or maybe somebody else coming out of left field, but there certainly isn't any chatter out there right now. And so, right now when I look at Tennessee's team, we talked about this. We had, James, on the podcast. We didn't talk about it on the podcast. We talked about it kind of off the podcast, just like, the camaraderie of this team is really good. Now, maybe that's because, all those NIL deals have kind of been mom and pop type NIL deals, and nobody's really got some big deal for somebody to be jealous of. I don't know. I go back and forth with it, Hubs. I just feel like that, we would already know more about kids sitting out, because right now is that time. They begin bowl practice coming up Saturday. Like, to me, if nobody announces between now and Saturday, everybody's going to intend on playing. Don't you? Because it feels like those Purdue kids, if they don't play, they're probably announcing at some point between now and Saturday.
Yeah, and I think they're going to play. I mean, I think that's the vibe out of Purdue, is that you're going to see both of these teams at full strength for an opportunity to help their stock and all of those things. I mean, I just don't think either one of these teams have enough bona fide, stars that somebody's a surefire that they can set out. So I think everybody's going to play. My biggest surprise, Rob Lewis, about this team, about this Tennessee team at this point, no portal news the last 8-9 days. That's the biggest surprise to me.
I agree. I mean, just nothing.
What do you make of that?
I mean, I guess maybe didn't we all assume that there were, certain guys that were going to be moving? I mean, I think, again, maybe some kids are waiting to the end of the semester, but if so, I mean, I don't think that's the case, because if you're moving, you want to get your name out there.
Well, yeah, you want to at least meet a school, and
you want to start talking to coaches and hey, I'm available. I need a prom date. And to me, I mean, I think that says a lot about this staff, for guys that I think there were a lot of kids that we assumed were maybe disgruntled because of the lack of playing time, and that does not appear to be the case.
What do you make of it, Austin?
It's befuddling to me. I mean, like, don't you think, first of all, we heard all season long Jimmy Holiday and some of those type guys potentially could go in the portal, and then D. Beckwith talking about how much he loves Josh Heupel and stuff. Like, D. Beckwith got on the field literally at the end of, what was it, the South Alabama game?
Yeah.
Whatever it was. They're at the end.
South Alabama.
After every other running back, David Yancey had even come out of retirement and got some carries before him. It makes no sense. I mean, like, most of these kids truly want to go somewhere and play. Maybe he's just happy and content. Maybe they've talked to him about a position change in the offseason. They just want to get to that point. I don't know. But it is, to me, surprising that more kids haven't gotten in the portal, to this point, just because, there are a few kids that did not play that feel like they probably should be playing or have a better opportunity to play. And to this point, they haven't got in. Now, maybe they've gotten good education from people on that. Maybe they've seen some kids that went in the portal and said, grass just isn't greener. I'm going to kind of hang in there and see what happens here. I mean, you look at some of those players like Eric Gray, Wanye Morris. I mean, if you're talking to players like that, you may rethink about going in the portal, because those kids, I know, have told some players that they made mistakes. They did not, play as much as they were told they were going to play at their new school. Grass isn't always greener. So maybe that plays into it. Maybe, kids just talk to each other. And, that's part of the reason that some of these kids have been slow to get in the portal.
We'll see what happens. The window for doing anything at this time of the year is closing quickly. Because coaches can be on the road this week to visit with players, including transfer players, but they can't be on the road next week, and you can't take a visit. So if you're going to do something in January and be somewhere in January, and you want to meet with a coach, you better get that done in short order, because the window for that is closing. All right, let's talk a little recruiting here. Certainly, we're going to jump into some basketball as well. Austin, let's start Tennessee with the visit weekend that took place this past weekend. Felt like some things went pretty well for Tennessee. I don't think any of us were expecting commitment news on Sunday of any real major news or anything like that, but it feels like the visit weekend went pretty solid for Tennessee. Let's talk a little bit about where you think Tennessee stands with the guys who visited this weekend. Obviously, they got Jordan Thomas in the boat, but where do they stand otherwise?
Well, obviously, also great news with Desmond Williams. Tennessee's, been in a good spot there. For me, like, it comes down to two kids, or it's really three kids. Caleb Webb, I think Tennessee's in phenomenal shape there. Don't think that one will go to signing day.
Okay.
And then the other two are linemen. It's a line of scrimmage league, Hugs. If you got to be good at the line of scrimmage, you got to be good at quarterback. And so,
and if you want to be a great team, you got to be good at both. But go ahead.
Correct. There you go. But you can function against
Sure.
middle of the road teams as long as you're good with somebody. Darren Agu, good looking kid, Hubs. 6'6". I think he's got a lot of raw ability, a lot of upside to him, and could be a player that really helps you. And then quickly helping you would be Jeffrey Mba, the kid from France. Little did we know that when Tennessee had a Tennessee Vols France Twitter handle, that it could come into play so much when you think about going from Yves Pons, now Jeffrey Mba. And, it's one of those things where I think if Tennessee can land Agu and Mba, then, that really helps them sooner rather than later. And you have to wonder, with crystal ball going from Miami or from Oregon to Miami, how much that helps Tennessee with Jeffrey.
Well,
he visited Miami officially. So
right.
maybe that's, but his mom didn't go to Miami. Does that matter? Does that matter? I mean, she's coming from France for these visits to Tennessee, Missouri, and Oregon. Will he even take the Oregon trip now? They're probably not going to have a head coach by the weekend.
Right. Here's my question. Does he cancel the Oregon trip and take another trip to Miami where he can take his mom, because they've got a new coach, much like DeMario Tolan? He can take a second official to Miami if he wants to. Does he punt on the Oregon trip and take a second official to Miami with crystal ball there, which would help Miami's cause, one would think, a good bit, because mom would see that. So I think that's something to keep an eye on, because right now the only place mom is seen is Knoxville, Tennessee, and she's seeing Columbia, Missouri, I guess, starting today. We'll see what kind of visit weekend Missouri puts on, or midweek visit Missouri puts on, compared to what Tennessee did this weekend. I don't think Missouri's a factor. I think the bigger question is, where does he visit this last weekend? Is it Miami? Is it Oregon? How does that play things out there? And then obviously Agu goes to Vanderbilt this weekend. So we'll see what happens with that. Is that a loyalty thing versus the ability to win more? I think will be the ultimate final kind of thing that he kind of waits through. I think it's just a loyalty thing with Vanderbilt at this point.
How do you say dead deer in French? Because the mom is driving from the airport to the complex in Missouri, and there's a dead deer on the side of the interstate every 5 feet.
That's true. There's not much happening there on that drive. That's for sure. It's pretty quiet. So, and then the question, we'll have more visit names coming up later this week, but maybe the biggest name coming in this last weekend, Austin, is the big defensive lineman from down in Georgia, in Tyreek West.
Yeah, Tyree West. Josh Heupel, Rodney Gardner in to see him on Monday. Tennessee's going to have a puncher's chance here, man. I mean, I really thought, if Tennessee had no shot, he would shut this thing down. I'm going to come up here this weekend, give it a look, and we'll see what happens. Tennessee also going to have the other kid from South Florida that they're recruiting, the defensive lineman that Rodney likes a lot. He's going to be in maybe late in the weekend. I don't think he's going to have a full weekend because he's got a wrestling tournament. And then of course Justin Williams. Tennessee continues to train really well there. I've said that for weeks. People can, here's the thing: Auburn has a new offensive coordinator. What can you really pitch to an offensive kid if you have no offensive coordinator? A dream, a hope and a dream.
Yeah, we'll see. And then can Tennessee get Jared Verse in, the transfer from Albany? Can they get him in for a visit as well, another defensive lineman? So lots of things going on, lots of moving parts. We'll continue to drop tidbits, notes, nuggets, whatever you guys want to call them, throughout the hours and days on this final week, getting ready for Tennessee's final recruiting weekend and the push to the finish line. While Tennessee's closing out and trying to close out big on the recruiting trail, Rob Lewis, the Tennessee basketball team, is on their week-long vacation. You get in a plane, you go to Denver, out to Boulder, back to Denver, back to New York, and now you're sitting there in the Garden getting ready to play after Kennedy Chandler carried a basketball team and put on a show on Saturday.
Yeah, it's going to get redundant to talk about. He is something special, man. I mean, that was as good as I've seen a Tennessee freshman play. I mean, I guess since Allen Houston a million years ago. But yeah, he had 13. He was 13 of 20 in the game, and I think I got the stat right. I think Colorado's 5 starters were 13 of 40 from the floor, and yeah, just really good. And it wasn't a case where he got hot and hit a bunch of 3-pointers. I mean, he was just blowing past people and getting to the rim all day long.
More impressed by Kennedy Chandler or Tennessee's defense?
I'll probably Kennedy, just because it's so fun to talk about. But Tennessee's defense is really good. That's the lowest. I do know I have this stat right. That's the lowest scoring game and the lowest shooting percentage Colorado's had at home since 2017, which that's pretty stout. And the defense is impressive because Kennedy's not going for 29 every night, but as Hubbard, the old saying goes, defense travels. You can control your defense with your effort and your execution. And I think a really big part of that was having Josiah back on the floor. I think he's a great communicator. I think when he and Volquest are out there, you could virtually switch everything. You got 2 guys that can both cover a lot of ground, that are long, can get into passing lanes. And again, Kennedy's not going to do that every night, but Tennessee can be a really, really good defensive team.
So when you look at this matchup that's taking place later today with Tennessee and Texas Tech, what is this Texas Tech team right now, Rob? Who are they? What are they in this Jimmy V Classic?
To me, I've seen them play a couple times, Hubbard, not the whole games. They have so many transfers. I mean, so I don't really know what they are. They got a new head coach, and with the turnover that came with that, there's so many guys that are still filling each other out. I mean, I think it's a really good matchup for Tennessee. I watched most of Texas Tech against Providence last week in a game they played on the road, and they have good guard play. They're really tough on the perimeter. It's not a team with a lot of length that's going to bother Tennessee that way. They start a couple of 6'8" guys in the post, and I like Tennessee's chances in this one. I mean, Texas Tech is really well balanced. They've got 5 guys that score double figures. Nobody over like 16 points a game, but to me, they're not going to be one of those teams, I don't think, that could just beat Tennessee up on the boards and give them problems that way, because I think that's going to be what you watch for.
All right. Group. Time for my weekly question. I asked you last week. I asked Rick Barnes last week, where are you in a rotation? He said he had no idea. You didn't. You said, I don't know. They've played again. They're going to play again later this evening. What do you make of is it starting to sort itself out, or is this going to be post-Christmas before we have any idea?
Hubbard, I don't know, and I don't like it. I mean, I'm a big Rick Barnes fan, but I don't like the rotation. I don't like the way I think Brandon Huntley-Hatfield should be playing more minutes. I think Justin Powell should be playing more minutes. I'm fine with Powell coming off the bench, because I think when you take some of your score, take Santi out, or some of your better shooters, I'm fine with him coming in and getting bench minutes. I just think he needs more. I think he should always play more than Victor Bailey. I love Urosh. He's one of the greatest teammates that you could ever have. At this stage of the season, Huntley-Hatfield is getting all of his minutes for me to try and get to push the kid's development. I mean, Rick loves Urosh because he knows what to do, and Hatfield is going to make some boneheaded mistakes, but I'm letting that kid play through it right now. I mean, the ceiling for that guy and what Urosh is going to be capable of giving you when he's at his best it's not comparable.
Be interesting to see how that one shakes out, and how Tennessee, can they put it back to back, to put it together defensively back to back, from the Colorado game, and then obviously the game tonight against Texas Tech. We'll have full coverage of that game and plenty of things. Rob's thoughts on that, everything post game with there. As we close out this podcast, I want to circle back around to a bit more of a kind of a national topic. We think the big name coaching searches are done. Miami, called their son back home, and Mario Cristobal. Brent Venables is at Oklahoma. They go the assistant route. Notre Dame goes the assistant route. We're not sure what Oregon's going to do at this point. Lincoln Riley's at USC. Brian Kelly's at LSU. Handicap this thing. Who's the big winner? Who's the big winner short term? Maybe who's the big winner long term? Austin, who you got? Who do you look at this group and say, that was a great get for them. That's a big win.
I'll go with Southern Cal. I mean, the fact that he's already pulled several of those kids that are committed to Oklahoma over to Southern Cal, he's going to be a flashy hire for kids in Southern Cal. He's an offensive guy. He's a quarterback guy. To me, that's a Southern Cal. After that, I would go Cristobal in Miami. I just don't think Brian Kelly's going to be a fit. And we'll see about Brent Venables. I think the combination of Venables and Levy would be pretty good. And you know, I think the Mannings really like Levy a lot. So I think that you would see Oklahoma become a real factor for Arch Manning if that happens.
Rob?
I got to go with Riley too. And I'm just going to echo everything AP just said. I think that's a great fit with Southern Cal is what I meant to say if I didn't. I think Riley fits there. He's an offensive guy. I think that's a spot where they want all the bells and whistles. I mean, think like the Showtime Lakers and all that. That's Southern California. And also, I mean, that's when you think about the most fertile quarterback recruiting ground in the country, think about it. Clemson, Alabama, and Ohio State are all starting kids from Southern California at quarterback. That Southern Cal couldn't get to stay home. Yep. And that's going to stop happening, in my opinion. And I'm echoing AP. I just don't see Brian Kelly as a fit down there. I mean, if he doesn't win big pretty quickly, I think they will eat him alive.
Yeah, he's got to win right out of the gate, Rob. I agree with that, because if he does, everybody will be fine. Winning cures everything. But if he doesn't, then like getting made fun of for him having a Southern drawl and sounding like Farmer Fran from the Water Boy and all that's gonna come back to bite him.
Yeah, I mean, he's by nature thin-skinned, so we'll see how he handles. I mean, the media doesn't necessarily crucify you down there, but the fan base will, and they're not afraid to tell you exactly how they feel to your face or on a phone call, on a radio show, or whatever. They're not bothered by that at all. So how he handles that, I think, is a storyline certainly to watch in year number one. I know that a lot of people were a little bit taken back that the first guy he let go was Tommy Moffitt, who had been there for nearly 20 years, had survived every coaching search there, and that's one of the first moves that he made. I think, and maybe I'm wrong here, I think for Tennessee, Cristobal and that's not the question I asked you guys, but I'm sitting here thinking about it. Cristobal to Miami might help Tennessee more than any other coaching move that's out there because of his recruiting ability to keep some of the big name South Florida kids home. You know, when you go look at the guys he's recruited when he was at other places, linemen to Alabama, receivers to Alabama, things like that, he will have an effect on Florida recruiting with Billy Napier. We didn't even talk about Billy Napier and where he factors into all of that. He's bringing an army with him, by the way, to Gainesville, if you haven't heard. But Mario Cristobal's ability, Rob, to keep the really good players in South Florida and to keep them away potentially from some SEC schools, if he can do that, is not a bad thing for Tennessee when you look at the landscape.
Yeah, I completely agree. I just wonder, though, I mean, do you think they can ever get back?
I don't know whether they're getting the money to do this, and I don't know who's running the show down there. You don't have an AD down there.
I read something about it, that there are a couple of billionaire boosters who are just sick of mediocrity, and they have ponied up, allegedly.
We'll see. I mean, to get there, they got to pony up some facilities things as well. I mean, there's a lot to get done at Miami. What do you guys make of the Napier hire after the press conference? And I know you don't win the press conference. That's not what it's about, Austin. But what's your takeaway from Billy Napier out of the gate there, particularly with the army of people that he's talking about hiring and all this other stuff? What was your takeaway from kind of his first public appearance as the Florida head coach?
Trying to sound impressive, trying to sound affirmative, strong. And did he get out over his skis a little bit too much? I don't know. We'll see. I think it depends on what his staff looks like, over the next couple of weeks.
And press conferences at the end of the day don't matter, right? I mean, that's the bottom line.
We all know that as much as any member in the country.
That's right.
I end up doing the Pruitt instead of the Dooley. I mean, why do we keep asking questions about the Miami Dolphins? I was only there 1 year.
Well, but yet everybody was all fired up because he talked Southern, and the previous hire, Lane Kiffin, everybody was fired up because he called out Florida. right? And then the next one you hire is, Butch Jones. He had been successful, and he dropped some sayings in his press conference. And then the next one was, he's just a football coach, and so all those things at the end of the day doesn't really matter.
We're going to get out in the streets with the SEC.
Yeah, you got to. We'll just let it go with that. We'll see how Tennessee can get out there. He did say that for sure. We'll see what Tennessee can do on the streets in the SEC to close out this recruiting class here this final week, as Tennessee has coaches scattered throughout the country. So we'll keep you up to date on all of that. Obviously, plenty of basketball coverage. We'll continue to follow that. And Tennessee will hit the practice field on Saturday for a bowl practice. Josh Heupel will meet the media at that point. And then you never know, as assistant coaching moves take place, or what may or may not happen out there in that ever-changing world as well. There'll be a lot of coaching moves on the assistant front after signing day that'll take place in the month of January. So there's still a lot more coaching movement to take place for sure. But that's going to do it for this Tuesday edition of the Smoky Mountain Organics podcast. And we thank them for their sponsorship. For Rob Lewis and Ralston Price, I'm Brett Hubbs. Thanks for joining us. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, everybody.
You've been listening to the Volquest podcast every week here on Volquest.